Welcome to Let's Get Curious, the podcast for women and mothers seeking connection, support, and inspiration. We are friends, mothers, and therapists. Lori, a physical therapist, and Dorothy, a speech and language therapist. Together, we share our personal stories, including IVF, birth experiences, and navigating children's learning difficulties. Through our discussions, we uncover profound lessons for personal growth. Join us on this journey of curiosity, compassion, and empowerment. Welcome to Let's Get Curious. Hello, everyone. So we are back again today, and we are so happy to have Chantal Traub back on our podcast. And for those of you who do not know her, she is a seasoned doula, a women's health educator, author, and speaker, and specializing specifically in empowering women through life's most significant transitions from childbirth to menopause. And Chantal, thank you for coming back on. We had originally recorded a podcast with you back in September of 2024, where you came on and shared your menopause story with us. And for anybody who wants to listen to that, I'll put that in the show notes. But that was episode 11, where you shared with us your whole story of vision loss and having a meningioma, a brain tumor. And in that conversation, we spoke about the Polyvagal Theory. And we wanted to have you back on to touch upon that a bit farther and explain to people a little bit about what it is and how you use it in your practice when working with women, from being a doula, from the birthing all the way through menopause. So I'm going to hand it off to you. And if you can kind of start to just share that with us a bit, and we'll see where this conversation takes us.
Yeah, thank you. And I'm glad that you mentioned how to use it through birth, through menopause coaching, because I was at a science and yoga conference. It was in 2018. And I went specifically to this conference because I knew that Dr. Porges was going to speak. And he had been on my radar for a few years about his work and about Polyvagal Theory. And I had some of his books, which are very hard to read and understand. And I was like, he's going to be in New York City. Let me go to this. I'm, certainly interested in yoga. I taught yoga for many, many years. And it felt like, it was a perfect conference to go to. And while I was listening to him speak, I was like, oh my gosh, this approach is something that I feel that I'm intuitively doing when I'm in the birth room supporting my clients at a birth. Like, it really resonated with me. And I approached him after, and I was like, to speak to him. And I said, it's so interesting because I feel like if the way that you explained the nervous system and how it works is something that intuitively, instinctively, I felt affects my clients in labors, but I didn't have the words to articulate it. But with your theory, with what you've brought into the world, it gives me a framework. And he was like, oh my gosh, you're a doula. Like, you have to meet my wife. She's a scientist and she specializes in oxytocin. Oh. And Dr. Sue Carter. And he was like, I'll introduce you. You'll have so much to talk about with her. And then we started getting a little deep into conversation. He said, well, why don't you shoot me an email and we'll keep this conversation going? And so we did. He introduced me to his wife, and we were having like these great conversations on oxytocin. And intermittently, I would write to him and ask him questions. And when the pandemic hit in 2020, I decided to pivot my practice like immediately to support, because here in New York City, where we were at the epicenter of the pandemic, doulas were suddenly not allowed to join their clients in labor in hospitals, and even spouses or significant others. So a lot of doulas were like, okay, I'm out. I decided I don't want to feel like I was abandoning my clients. Like, how could I support them better? And so I just wrote to him a little bit, because when we talk about polyvagal theory and understanding the social engagement system and the vagus nerve, which is like all about face-to-face, eye contact, the sound of your voice, the sound of your tone, your ears hearing. I was like, how can I optimize that for my clients? Because Now I'm going to be on Zoom. And it gave me the confidence to be able to know what to focus on so I could stay with my clients and be able to support them going through their birthing experience, even though I wasn't with them in the room, but I was with them on their iPad, if you will. And then focusing on those qualities of really listening and using the face-to-face. So it was quite easy for me because I've never been a texting doula. Like with my clients, I'm like, you can text me coordinates, but I don't text in labor. I want to hear how you sound. I don't want to miss anything. If you send me a text, you have to expect that I'm going to pick up the phone and call you because I don't want to miss anything. I want to hear what you sound like in labor to know if it's early, if things are getting active, and so I already had that style of wanting to be on the phone. So hearing someone's voice, letting them hear my voice to be able to help them feel, safe, connected, and not alone. And then when we were allowed back in the rooms, we were wearing masks. So now we're working with a lot of work using your eyes to convey connection, offering cues of safety to my clients, and projecting more because we want people to be able to hear us, but still sound calm and caring, not that you shout, So I was talking to him quite a bit via email about that. So it was so interesting that he was part of this whole journey with something really big where I started incorporating his theory into my work, which I'll go a little bit more deeper into. And so it's about the nervous system. And when we talk about the nervous system, before we came up with these theories, it was kind of like you're either in fight or flight or you like regulated. But they didn't really bring up that there was this very old ancient one that if you can't fight or run your way out of a difficult situation, right, the fight or flight, you either fight or flee. If you can't, you kind of go back down that evolutionary pathway into that dorsal where you're going to collapse, you dissolve and disappear. And it wasn't just like you're either regulated or it was like you're flowing in between all of these nervous system states, but needing to be able to come back to a regulated state. Find your way back to that is essential. So while we're moving through all these different states on a daily basis, it's knowing where you are and knowing how to come back to a regulated state. And so what started was a little bit of an unraveling in myself, was kind of understanding myself while I was also working with my clients. So I recognized in myself that, due to childhood adversity or whatever it may be, like our past story that we had, that I was living most of the time in fight or flight, kind of in a sympathetic mode. I was always go, go, go. And with it, it's not necessarily all bad, but when you live there all the time. So it could look like something like over-exercising, overworking, being a workaholic, go, 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 having very difficult time resting, sitting still, going on vacation, taking time off. And as you know, it's incredibly hard to heal when you're in a state of sympathetic. You heal when you're in a regulated state. And I started becoming really aware of myself. Like my whole life story really was that I was go, 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 go so much. I'd push myself so hard. I would get injured. I would recover just enough to go, 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 go. And so I never really used to get sick. I would get injured. So I would injure joints was my thing. And I never really understood it. I just knew that I had this kind of like survival mode that I was always in, even though the past was behind me and now I'm living now in the present day, but we bring this with us. And I started becoming really more aware of it and beginning to understand, like, how can I create more time spent in a regulated nervous system state? And what does that mean? Like, what does feeling safe mean for me? And so looking at that in myself and beginning to work with that and looking at what drives you, what is your default, and really becoming aware of it, and then making choices around that became really important to me. And at the same time, while I was an anchor for so many people, like I'm quite good at being the anchor and offering calm energy to other people, like being the giver, the taking care of person, I wasn't really doing that for myself. I also then began, the more I started understanding working with myself, I started realizing that with my clients, why were some of my clients doing really, really well in birth and why some were not? And so it started giving me this lens that I started kind of looking at people and observing and wanting to understand where they were in their nervous system, where were they living, and how could I, as the doula or the coach, now offer cues of safety, cues of regulation to their nervous system so that they could then feel that they could relax and feel safe in their nervous system. So when Dr. Porges talks about the nervous system, one, it's like understanding that hierarchy. And there is a hierarchy that we go through, almost like, and since I live in New York City, I think of it like train tracks. You know, there are different paths that we go through, and you can't necessarily go from one path to another. You kind of have to come down in a certain way. So for example, say something happens and you're in a situation that you are feeling unsafe. You will initially try to get out of that situation, right? So if you can't flee out of that situation, you can't fight your way out of that situation, then maybe you start going inside of yourself, right? You kind of dissolve in. But you can't be like, oh, snap out of it, let's get regulated. You kind of have to rev up, get a little bit of sympathetic, a little bit of energy, right, to get back to a regulated state. So understanding how those systems work, so to be able to help yourself get back to a regulated state, and then to be able to help my clients. And I developed and expanded my practice to take care of women through pregnancy, postpartum, perimenopause, and beyond. So I had developed that menopause practice, and it's with my practice as well as a coach. When I'm working with my clients, I'm thinking about, first of all, so for you as well as physical therapist, when you're stepping to that room with your client, first understanding where are you on that hierarchy, and then be curious about someone else. Where might they be, and how can I send out cues of regulated energy to be able to help them feel safe, secure, and connected, which is where we want to be, like in a physical therapy session or in a coaching session or at a birth. Dr. Porges also came up with this really, really cool word called neuroception, which is kind of perception below consciousness. So it's like we have this neuroception where we are always scanning our environment to find out, is what's in this environment safe for me or threatening for me? We use this neuroception to go, what am I feeling inside? Am I feeling safe or am I feeling threatened? And what am I picking up from this person or people in this room or in this space from them? Is it cues of threat or cues of safety? So understanding in oneself, like my neuroception to you, what are you picking up from my neuroception? Are you picking up my dysregulated energy or regulated energy, meaning does my cues, my energy coming off me, threatening to you or allowing you to feel safe? And you make decisions on that. So in the birth room, for example, I may have a client, right, and she's laboring and we're in our zone, and the OB or midwife comes rushing in from another birth or from the operating room or from dealing with something, and she comes in and she stands at the door, he or she, they, and they may be feeling a little bit agitated or stressed, or they might just be standing like that, or might be like, oh my gosh, I haven't seen someone making so much noise in labor before. And my client could be picking up, like thinking, well, wait, why are they angry or why are they mad? Because when sometimes someone has fear, they can look angry. So I noticed that in some of like the students, the medical students, sometimes they look like they're angry when realize they've never seen like a physiological birth before, for example. Or so, and when you are in labor, you're very porous to the energies in the room. So when we go through life, whether it's early adversity or any traumas, little traumas, big traumas, it shapes our nervous system in such a way that our neuroception becomes wired to receive this information, maybe kind of a little bit, I don't want to say wrong, but we may pick up the wrong cues, unintended, and then we get this miscommunication, these ruptures that happen between people, as we know. And it may even happen in our own relationships with our spouses, with our children, at our co-workers, our clients. So knowing where you are in your nervous system, you can ask yourself, is this reaction needed in this moment? Where am I? Because if I'm in a state that isn't regular, I'm going to maybe pick up the wrong cues from someone and misread them. And then it's going to make a story. And our nervous system shapes our stories. And I found this to be so important, especially in the birth room, because something could happen and it's interpreted in a certain way, just through the neuroception and understandably a vulnerable nervous system that might be a little bit, we aren't sympathetic when we're in labor. We activated to give birth, and then ideally we want to shift over into a regulated, to be immobilized without fear, to be able to let the baby out, right? That's intimacy, that's the giving birth part, that's breastfeeding or chest feeding, whatever it is. That's immobilization without fear. Then there's immobilization with fear. So we are looking at the different states with fear or within safety, because you're sympathetic, but not necessarily in fear. That's play, that's dance, that's sports, that's even the act of giving, laboring when you're feeling safe and connected, for example. So understanding where your nervous system and understanding your neuroception. And then for me, when I work with my clients, I want to help my clients feel safe. So, for example, and I see this so important, like even in my coaching practice, that I'm providing context for my clients. I don't wait for them to ask. I will explain the why, the how. So that gives them the context so they're not wondering. That helps them feel safe. I will, as much as I can, I will offer choices. So you need to know your clients. It might not be like a whole smorgasbord of choices, because that can be confusing and overwhelming, but 1, 2, or 3 choices. And you might do that for your clients as well. And you can think of in your own ways to give them back that autonomy. And at the same time, I'm offering cues of connection. So as the practitioner, as the provider, as the physical therapist, as the coach, it is really important to be able to anchor oneself in regulated energy, so that when we are serving our clients, we are aware, and sometimes we're not. We can even explain that, so that provides context. Like, you might be wondering why, but this happened earlier on today, and I might still, whatever it might be.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's important in relationships, and certainly raising teenagers. It has changed the way I've parented, and even in my marriage. I think the way understanding where my significant other might be in that moment, when I'm either picking up cues or responding to something. The same with my kids. Oh, and so another really important thing, because you mentioned birth, is that this is why I think we got so excited when me being a doula and asking about birth, because Dr. Porges came up with this theory when he was working originally in the NICU with preterm babies. That's where he started understanding through heart rate variability. And it's a much deeper, longer story to get into. But what I wanted to share was that ideally in the world, we come out into this world, into the arms of a regulated other adult person, right? Who can then co-regulate us until we're mature enough to self-regulate ourselves. Now, this doesn't happen. How many of us come into this world and have very dysregulated caretakers? And so then we are learning to self-regulate when we never got the co-regulation that we need, and we might not be having the most healthiest forms of self-regulation necessarily. And then, in relationships, that's what we do for each other, is that we take turns in co-regulating each other. And as a parent, I'm very aware of that my role as a parent is to co-regulate my littles, right, until they learn, right, how to be able to self-regulate themselves as they grow and mature and can do that. They have the tools. I don't know how many of you or your listeners, maybe when you were going through something as a young kid and you'd be like, go off to your room and go figure it out on your own. Don't come out until you sorted it out. Or instead of having maybe someone sit with you and just be with you and allow you to feel your feelings and come back to like offering that container of safety. I found like as a parent, especially when I was having preteens, when those emotions were bigger. Now I feel like it's like in perimenopause. Like once you get into postmenopause, things are much calmer.
Yeah.
The same as the preteens. Once they become more like a teen, it's like things are more calmer. But it's for those hormones. But to be able to be, just offering that container of safety where they can feel like they can express their feelings in a healthy way. And feel safe about doing that, not judged, not shamed, not,
Yes. Yeah, no, it's wonderful. My head is like when putting on the lens of just looking out in the world, and I'm like, everybody is walking around in a dysregulated, sympathetic fight or flight state. So from the polyvagal theory, then, Chantal, it sounds like it is more of being able to acquire a level of awareness than it is an actual technique.
It's about first, there's that saying, who wrote that? Socrates, maybe, know yourself and then become, what does man, know thyself first, right? Or, but then with polyvagal theory, it's like know yourself and then become curious about another, like understand your nervous system, right? We're always learning. So, but ideally we learn to understand where we are residing. Where do we go? Like, where are we often running? Because we move down these pathways very quickly. A look, a word, a phrase, and we're often running down those old familiar pathways. And then it takes, right? It could take, if it's like, family dramas, right? It could take like 2 weeks to come back.
Yes.
So being able, like, yes, we might have that and then, okay, hold on a moment. I recognize that. And you don't judge because our nervous system is there to protect us. So not to judge. It's like, oh, okay. Is this reaction needed right now? Can I come back to a regulated state and then hear that again? Or respond in a way that might be more, from coming from a place of like more regulation than I got triggered. So it's kind of understanding what are your cues of safety? What do you need? What are those anchors? And then what are the things that trigger you so that you can have a little bit more choice? It helps you then discern, basically, and which gives you choice.
Which I can see this being very challenging for somebody who isn't even aware that what their triggers might be. They just immediately respond. right?
Yep.
And then don't take the time to stop a second and self-reflect and ask yourself, oh, wow, okay, why did I react that way?
Oh,
Whether it's a
yeah.
positive response or a negative response. So yeah, it's bringing in this, self-reflection is, I
Not
think, the
easy
best
for
way.
some people are not self-reflective. So then you have the choice of how you kind of manage that,
Mm-hmm.
for example.
Yes. Yeah. Well, the whole polyvagal technique or theory is something that should be almost like mandatory for those that are in any type of service, right? Whether it be a school teacher, a healthcare practitioner, whatever it be,
Absolutely.
because I just think of, everything that you are describing to me. I mean, it just is bells and whistles for me going off for our children and the teachers, and because this is the world that I'm in right now with preteens and hormones changing, as well as some past traumas from school. And so it's like this moment to just stop and pause and reflect in every situation that I'm encountering with either one of my children, and always checking in, like, is this my stuff or is this their stuff? And if it is, then again, where does the work need to come in? Do I need to go calm myself down first and then be able to be there for them? Did we all explode and now we need to go back and repair? But this is it's kind of exciting times, in my opinion, because of what
It's
we
so exciting.
are,
Yeah.
learning. Because to your point, like you said, yeah, back in the day, it was just, okay, go brush it off. You're fine. You're tough. You'll be, you'll be better before you're married, or whatever were those like silly things that our parents would say
Yeah,
to us.
stuff up a lip or skin up your nose,
Yeah. And
like,
yes, we have to teach, yes, we need to learn resilience and grit too in life. But yeah, I mean, there's a big piece of validation, right? That also brings in the calming of the nervous system. At least that's what I found in my experience here at home too, is when I validate where what my children are feeling, then it opens up the conversation and it continues. And so that level of awareness was continuing to build within them. And when they're having whatever is their moment, like, where did that come from? Why do you feel that way? Where are you feeling that anger or that scaredness in your body? And we're having conversations, around it.
yeah.
But yeah, I just look at education and schools because, so many times kids are deemed as the bad kid and the bad behavior, when really it's, a nervous
Yeah,
system
it's
calling
a
out for
nervous
help.
system for help. Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely.
And
I know.
and of course, being then that adult in the room with X amount of kids in front of you, I mean, talk about lots of energy coming at you. And so yeah, having that work done as a teacher or the doctor, when you're there seeing all these patients, a day, and they're coming in, some are feeling good today, some are feeling crappy today, and they put their energy on you. I mean, many times, right, Dee Dee? We've experienced that too as healthcare practitioners. And of course, you learn to not take it personal and whatnot. But yeah, I mean, being able to stand in that power, your power of awareness, and honoring what is mine, what is theirs, and then being able to have those, providing those cues of
Yeah,
safety, is it's so beneficial.
absolutely. I think it's such essential work. That's why I was blown away. And I was like, oh my gosh, like we sense this, we know this, but
Mm-hmm.
understanding how to bring it down and then to really look at it, I think that is so helpful because I think intuitively we know, but it's much harder to build that awareness and be discerning and then make choices. And then, as to your point, when there's a rupture, if we don't come back and repair it, right? We humans are storytellers. Then stories are made. Think of
Mm-hmm.
all the family feuds that there are
Yeah, that
then.
lasts for 20 years, and the sisters stop talking to each other, and whatever be the situation. I know.
Yeah. So I think in our own worlds, knowing if there's a rupture, if there's a way that we can repair it through understanding and awareness, I think that can be really helpful. And I see that, like, I think as a doula, like even in my work, so when I prep my clients for birth, we do a lot of this ahead of time, just building awareness. But even on, like, where do you go when you're, say, triggered? Like, what's your default? Just learning where the defaults are. And you also know in your clients a little bit, like if, as I mentioned, if there's like, a past wound, we're wired in a certain way, or people are wired in a certain way, and that's their default, especially under stress. So if you think about birth or a physical injury or pelvic pain or whatever it might be that someone's going through, to really be aware of that. So I had a client who was interesting. So while she was in labor, some nurse came into the room, and there were two nurses actually. And being the doula, I could understand what was going on, but there was this one nurse in the room she was very quiet, but she was just really organizing things in the room, coming in, sorting things out, but she wasn't like chit-chatty or anything. And my client just, was like, this nurse's vibes is just, not good. I kind of don't want her in here. And she's like, well, I really like the other nurse. She's like chit-chatty. And I realized that this was an older nurse, and this was like a younger, someone who just maybe just started, and it was a little bit more talkative. And when the older nurse came into the room and she was leaving the room, I said, oh, I'm just going to step out with you for a second. And I just suggested her, I said, why don't you come over to my client and just introduce yourself and let her know what's going on. I think, we nobody knows each other. And she was like, oh, I was just trying to be respectful. I didn't want to interfere. Like, you guys were in such a kind of zone. I'm training this, young new nurse, so I'm just really overseeing her. And I said, I understand completely. But I don't think like the patients, the clients really understand. And she was like, yeah, of course, absolutely. So later she came in and she came up to the bedside and she introduced herself and she said, I'm just taking care of a few rooms. We're training some new nurses. If you need anything, don't hesitate to ask. But I'm just sorting out the room, getting ready for when it's delivery time, making sure that we're stocked up, and overseeing the lovely young nurse that we have here. And it just totally changed my client. She was like, in the end, the story became, oh yeah, she's so professional. And it just changed her whole, just a small example of just a nurse in the room.
Yeah. Yes.
So I think, just being aware of how someone else's neuroception is picking up when you enter a room, especially like a labor delivery room or physical therapy room or coaching. So I take a moment before I start a Zoom session with a client just to kind of ground myself and make sure that I've put everything else aside and I can be kind
in
of
connection
open.
mode.
Yeah,
In connection mode.
Exactly.
Well, and what you just described, I think is beautiful because it's this domino effect, right? Like you could have gone out to the older nurse and she could have taken it very personal and been offended and walked off the case or whatever be the situation. And obviously, the energy that you went in with to approach her was non-invasive, right? So it's this whole domino effect. And I think that's the mistake that a lot of people end up making is we're not aware of the energy we're approaching somebody with, which then automatically can put them into a protection, fight or flight mode. And then they're taking things personal when that was nobody's intention. So I think that's a beautiful example of how you've
100%.
gone in with a grounded energy, approached her in a very non-invasive way. She was very understanding and can see how maybe that energy, her energy or her silence, even though she was being very professional and respectful, was misinterpreted by somebody else. And yet nothing escalated is my point. Like you had the
Yeah.
conversation, but I think that your conversation with her was successful because of the energy that you brought forward. And then it is this domino effect.
It's 100%. It's again understanding what are the essentials for safety. It's providing context, offering choice. You can come in and chat, or you don't have to, of course, and offering those cues of connection. So I see this so often in labor and delivery rooms, and I think it's just because look, it's burnout for nurses as well. There's a lot of burnout. There are the
Absolutely.
most hardworking people I've ever met, labor and delivery nurses. Like, those are long shifts and they work really hard. I have utmost respect for them. And it's their home. They run the show. I totally get it. And as a doula, I'm coming on, I feel like I am the guest, but I'm also advocating and kind of the bridge often between my clients and the nurses. And I remember a situation where my client had just given birth and the nurse wanted to do some things with the baby, and my client was saying like no, and could she have this, and asking for things and requesting things, and the nurse kind of got very huffy and she left the room. And I had a feeling about it, so I kind of stepped out with her, and she, at the nurse's station, I overheard her saying to the other nurses about that difficult patient. And I just said to her, excuse me, like, she just gave birth. Like, she just went through something huge for the first time in her life. Is it possible that we could maybe get a warm blanket that I could just put on her? And I'm happy to go get it if you just tell me where. But just, just to understand, like, she's very protective of her newborn. She doesn't want her to be poked and prodded. And can we just maybe have like a few minutes and then come back in and it'll be fine. Just let me just settle her, get acquainted, and I'll totally support you in what you have to do. But just please understand, like, she's just given, she's not difficult. And anyway, she came back later and it was fine. But it was just like, you can see where these ruptures happen, where someone misreads, someone who might come across as, but she's just given birth. Like, she went
and she has a job to do, right? So she has to stay on task because of the anxiety that might be coming up in her of everybody else that's, she might be behind on, or the other 10 patients, on the floor. And so she's not wrong. That nurse isn't wrong. But yes, I think that's where, and I'm really trying to practice this, is to just take a moment, just pause a second, go inward, gauge where I am, know what's my stuff, what's the space, and then make sure that I don't put that energy then out on my children, on my spouse, so on and so forth. And it doesn't have to take long. It just like that quick little 30 seconds, even less, of just, okay, wait a minute. Where am I?
And for me, I also always go back to, what is their experience? I have my experience, but you have your own experience. And this is a lot with my child, who for a long time was getting dysregulated every 15 minutes all day long. So talk about needing to stay centered and grounded and in connection mode. I mean, that was super tough. And one thing that helps a lot is to try to see it through the other person's eyes. And even with, medical professionals and nurses, and I'm guilty of this too. I worked in, acute rehab for many years. And yes, you have compassion, and yes, you have, your heart goes out to your patients. But after a while, it does become, I don't want to use the word mechanical. That's a really bad word. But you just kind of go through those motions of like, okay, here's another stroke patient. I got to do the same test that I give all stroke patients that have, this type of diagnosis. Or an infarct in this area. And you do have to stop and realize each person is unique. They're coming in with their own experience. And even though I have my own agenda, it's not about me. It's about them and their experience and what they need. So
yeah, I think it's so fascinating, and you can take it so deep, like even with your clients, like when you're first meeting them, whether you're in a hospital setting or in private practice, like when you step into the room, do you stand at the door? Do you pull up a chair really close? Are you halfway in between? Like, just gauging just even where you place yourself in the room, the space that you're in. Is it offering cues of safety, or is it offering cues of threat? It gets so interesting to me. So I love it. I think about it all the time when I'm working with clients. And so just developing that awareness more and more to get a sense of where they're ready, right? Like, do you come straight in? Do you hold back? So that becomes, interesting as well. You want to give them the choice as well.
Yes. And they're probably already coming in feeling vulnerable and in protection mode if it's their first birth or you have a health scare. And so, and even when I was still like back in the day working in the hospitals and having physical therapy students, I would say to them, like, there's going to come a point where you're going to be on your 200th hip replacement rehab and it's going to be easy peasy. You know what to do, what to look for. But that person that you are encountering, it's going to be their first time, most likely. And so you have to remember that and be respectful that they're coming in first experience, scared, in pain, you know. And to your point, I mean, just to circle back to you, Dee Dee, it's like it's you. I mean, that's what makes you a professional, is you get to understand your skill and become skilled at it and good. But you can't lose the empathy and the connection along the way just because it is so mechanical. To your point, Dee.
I want to circle back to what, go ahead, Chantal. Go
I
ahead.
was just going to say to that point, it's not so black and white, because sometimes there is fears or concerns or pains but it's like, do the cues of safety outweigh the cues of threat? Yes. So it's just how much weight is there, because it's not all or nothing, right?
Great point.
Or do the cues of threat outweigh the cues of safety? So you're just wanting to give enough to downregulate the person that you're helping co-regulate.
Yeah, that makes sense. You were just talking about body proximity, and it made me it reminded me of years ago. I waited probably a year on a wait list to go work with this very well-known psychotherapist. And I'm like, oh my gosh, it's my turn. I can finally see this person, and I'm going to process all this stuff, whatever. And I get into the office, we do the initial evaluation, and he sits probably 10 feet away from me. I'm not kidding you. Maybe even farther. I should have measured it. And I never went back again. And I'm like, I feel no connection to you whatsoever at all. Yeah. And that was the end of that appointment.
Wow.
Yeah. Because how can you connect with someone if they're not even like in your space, you know?
Yeah.
So,
no,
I know.
It becomes really fascinating when you think through all these kind of details, and how we can improve on that for our own clients and families and the people that we come into contact with.
Yeah.
Well, I got to say, I just love, I mean, when you were talking about what you do as a doula, I wish I had known you 9 years ago when I gave birth to my child, because everything that you're describing is what I did not have. And I'm so happy. I didn't even, honestly, at that point in my life, I didn't even know that is a service that was out there. So I'm so glad that we're talking about it. My birth was 43 hours. I pushed for 4 hours. The entire time I felt like the nurses were kind of in their own world, doing their own things. I didn't feel connected to any of them. I kind of felt like I was on my own, honestly, just going through each contraction. So I'm just so glad that you were, this is something that you do. And my gosh, just the small changes that you make such a big impact in that environment. So I'm just so grateful that you're sharing this with us, and that people know that this is something that they can reach out for and for that support.
Absolutely. No, one should never feel alone, whether you're going through birth or even through perimenopause. I think that, there is support out there. And even when I'm helping my clients with sleep, like I'm looking at the nervous system, right? Because you can't sleep deeply when you're in survival mode. The body is going to always be in survival. So it's like, what do I need to feel safe enough to be able to fall asleep, stay asleep, have quality sleep? And it gets deeper and deeper. But yeah, for your birth, I'm so sorry, because that's like, a birthing mama should never feel alone. Like,
yeah. Well, I got through it,
Yeah, you did. You're strong. You're resilient. Absolutely. And again,
thank you. Yeah.
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit more about the sleep? Because I am going through the hormonal changes and having difficulty sleeping, and parenting a child who is neurodivergent. So I do feel, probably like a lot of parents feel, that I'm in this hyper vigilant, low level stress response all day long. And some days are different than others, and it just depends. But I know that there's a lot of parents that do feel like they're just waiting for the next blow up, the next, I don't want to say explosion. I don't want to use that word, but just the next period of dysregulation. So it's hard to settle in and feel safe and connected and relaxed when my child is having a day where it's just hard for him to access that.
Yeah.
So how do we, this is a big question, but how do we work on sleep, and how do we work on that if
Yeah. Well,
it's
first
during
of
that
all,
state?
let me answer that in a moment, and there's a few parts there. But first of all, I teach webinars and classes on sleep, menopause, and the nervous system, a few times a year, and I actually have one on May 21st. So, I mean, you can jump into that. It's going to be recorded. I mean,
Thank you.
yeah, it's just check my website out,
Uh-huh.
chantaltraub.com, and because it's going to be a whole hour on that. So we'll dive deep into that. So here's the thing, when we're going through something difficult, right? And life definitely has ups and downs, and sometimes we are just going through difficult times, and learning what are our dependable anchors that we can access quickly, and what are going to be other practices that we can access that needs like a little bit more time. So for example, things that might help calm the nervous system, both for both you and your kid, are finding ways. First of all, it's very somatic. The body needs to feel safe. So
Mm-hmm.
finding what needs to feel safe. So whether it's sound or touch or movement might be helpful for your kid. And where are you located?
I'm in Massachusetts.
That's it. Okay, because I do know some people that work with kids for
Okay.
this, so I could send you some resources. But
Thank you.
let's talk about you just for yourself, because it's two big questions. So in the moment, who is your who? Where is your where? What is your what that helps you feel regulated, like in a moment? So for example, for myself, like say I'm doing like a 12-hour labor or something, right? I'm in the labor room with my clients. Sometimes it's just I've been 12 or 24 hours, whatever it might be, like an overnight, right? I'm going to need just opportunities to just kind of like ground myself, but also I want opportunities to be able to just ground my client who's like maybe not in a home space. So for example, for me, I will always scout out the room that I'm in and go like, okay, for me, looking out the window and seeing trees or clouds or birds on a wire, whatever it is going to help bring me back into my body. So I might just kind of go look out the window. Like sometimes when I'm working like long hours, I ideally have time in between clients, but I can look out the window, I can see the tops of the trees, I'll see the seasons, and I'm like, oh, that like in itself will just ground me. When I think of like where's my where, so in the summers, it might be a week we go to the upstate to the Adirondacks, just 1 week every summer. We're deep into nature. It's like nothing around us. Like there's this amazing lake. And I just have such incredible memories of like swimming in the lake, floating in the lake, canoeing in the lake, kayaking in the lake, whatever it is. And I just think of that lake, and it will bring me right back. Right. So I think you could think of a person like your grandmother, your loved one, or even your sweet child on a good day, like have that memory of a hug, whatever it is. It could be a grandparent that's passed, it could be a mentor, it could be a person, it could be a place, it could be a thing, it could be a little, smooth river stone that you just carry in your pocket that might ground you. For example, it could be some breath work. So those are like maybe the quick things.
Mhm.
So like that just takes a moment, and it will just help anchor you in that moment. And then having some practices, like for example, like a somatic one and maybe you can even try this with me. There's something called the basic exercise, and it involves just a little bit of movement. And you have to know your kid, it needs to either be slow finding that rhythm or fast, whatever it is that they may need. You want to make sure that it's down regulating and not up regulating. But so it's called the basic exercise. And basically, and maybe you know it, but sitting straight, I'll invite you and the listeners out there, if you're not driving in your car, I'd say definitely do it. But I use this for my clients in labor. I use this for my clients before they go to sleep at night. I do this in between if I wake up in the middle of the night and want to go back to sleep, or maybe as I'm going to sleep. So we'll just turn our head all the way to the right and notice how much tension or tightness we might have in that right side, and then turn your head all the way to the left and just notice the difference, left or right. If you have a little bit more range, we'll just do that again. Now just go all the way to the right. Notice if you have tightness, and then all the way to your left. And come back to center. And then we'll take our hands and we'll interlace our hands right at the occiput of the head, so the heel of your head, and have your elbows just wide aside that if you look to your periphery, you just see the corner of your elbow, like so you just see the elbows. And now, keeping your arms where they are, we're going to keep our head forward and just take our eyes all the way to the right. And it might bring up a yawn, a swallow, or a sigh. And that would be your cue then to come back to center. With your eyes, keeping your head forward, just take your eyes to the left. And that might bring up a yawn, a sigh, or a swallow. Come back to center. Release your arms. And then take your head all the way to the right. Notice if you have a little bit more range there. And all the way to the left. And come back to center. And let me know what you noticed.
Wow.
Wow.
I felt
amazing.
And when before we started recording, Chantal, Lori and I were checking in, and she's like, "How are you doing?" And I said, "My neck is so tight today." And so I've been feeling that through this recording, and I feel like 50% of it is gone. I feel like I just kind of dumped energy that I was holding in that space.
Yeah.
Wow.
Amazing.
Wow. Okay. Sign me up.
That was like a little vagal nerve tonic, because the vagus nerve it comes all the way up, right? Mm-hmm. All the way to our ears, our eyes, our mouth, and then all the way down towards our gut, right? So it's bidirectional. And what I wanted to mention, I forgot, what I got excited about meeting Dr. Porges with, starting off with NICU, is like when the baby comes out and it's those first reflexes, which is suck, swallow, breathe, mm-hmm. That is the beginning of that social development.
Wow, that's fascinating.
Fascinating.
Wow.
So,
then
if system. For any of our listeners listening, Chantal, is the polyvagal, is it just, again, like, can you take a class and learn something from it? Or is it, I have to sign up to become certified in it? What are the different levels of it,
so
if somebody was more interested?
The Polyvagal Theory, which Dr. Steve Porges developed this theory, they now have an institute. Mm-hmm. And I've known him for years, and so I've been kind of grandfathered in to say that I offer polyvagal informed coaching, because years ago, and I teach for the Polyvagal Institute a few times a year. I've taught at their conference. They were always like, "You don't have to be certified. We want you to take it and go out into the world." And Dr. Porges was like, "I want you to give it in your own unique way." In the last few years, they are offering certifications. I have learned so much. I feel like I've had Dr. Porges as a mentor like all these years, mm-hmm. which has been, I feel very lucky that way. But he has written so many books. Okay. And so I love Dr. Porges' his work. He wrote a more recent one with his son that kind of really brings it down.
Oh, is that the sound?
The Safe and Sound
Safe protocol? And Sound? Is that
so? Yeah, no, that's actually now owned by Unite, but that might be very helpful for your son. If you can find, I'm actually certified with the Safe and Sound protocol, but there are a lot of OTs that use it. And I was thinking that an occupational therapist who can use Safe and Sound protocol would be great for you. So I could find out for someone in your area.
Thank you.
Yeah, so that could be really good. So he has a new one. I think it's called Rhythm and Regulation. Another sound. So he uses sound a lot to mm-hmm. give you the cues, the bodily cues to bring you back into regulation. I would say that works well for someone who is very dysregulated or is traumatized. Like, it doesn't work as well for someone who's able to kind of like, say, regulate themselves. You don't see such a big difference. But mm-hmm. So that's out there. So, and then one of his colleagues, Deb Dana, who's a therapist, like, she also writes a lot of books, and she's able to also really bring down the polyvagal theory. into, for us like landlubbers to be able to really understand polyvagal theory a lot. So she's a great resource as well if people are interested. Dr. Porges, like, he's my person, so I love reading his books. They takes more concentration to really understand, but it's like his language that really speaks to me.
Good.
And then I offer coaching through a polyvagal informed approach. So I offer polyvagal coaching to women, and I specialize in, women's health. So perimenopause, menopause, postmenopause. And most of my clients are, struggling with sleep. So I teach a lot on sleep and specialize in sleep. And we can do this whole conversation on sleep.
I know, it can continue. It can continue. Yes, I know. Well, this has been wonderful. And, I encourage everybody who's listening to just, again, like, become aware. Just start checking in with yourself, right? This is where this work really, it starts with you. It really starts with you. So just taking a moment to pause multiple times a day if you can, especially in transition periods. Okay, kids are coming home from school. What space am I in? Okay, I have to go into this meeting. What space am I in? And just start practicing that level of awareness on yourself. I think that would be a great first step for anybody who's listening. Because I know it's constant work, and by no means do I have this 100% dialed in, but I can tell you from the changes, from me practicing this, and then the changes that I'm making within my household, there definitely is progress. There's progress and there's change. So Chantal, thank you so much again for coming on.
I just want to end on one note,
Please.
Because I think what you were saying is, and I've learned this from Dr. Porges, is like the biggest kind of, I don't even want to say gift, but the biggest gift that we can give somebody is our accessibility. And so when we become aware of our nervous system and we become accessible, it can be very healing for someone else, because it allows them to ground and heal, like begin to heal themselves, right? In that way.
Yeah. Holding space, right? Holding space for somebody. Yeah.
Exactly.
Beautiful. Oh my gosh. Well, wonderful as always. We can keep talking. So we might have to have you on again, Chantal, is the point. But yes, thank you so much. And between the book recommendations and your website and your classes coming up, Chantal will put that all in the show notes. And yes, thank you for tuning in, everybody. Have a great day. Bye.
Thank you.
The information shared on this podcast is for informational purposes only and is based on the opinions and experience of Lori, Dorothy, and their guests. The content should not be used as a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or a treatment. Always seek the advice of your healthcare provider with any questions you may have regarding a medical condition. Never disregard professional medical advice or delay in seeking it because of something you heard on this podcast.